Why do most people feel like something is missing even when they do everything society told them to? Why does success feel hollow and ambition feel endless? The answer is simple, yet terrifying. You're not who you're supposed to be yet. This video will show you why most people never reach their true potential and how the hidden king inside of you can be awakened. Through ancient symbols, unconscious forces, and a map buried inside your mind, we will uncover the psychological journey that leads you to your highest self. This is the path of the inner monarch, the true ruler of your destiny. There is a figure in the human psyche that lies hidden, often unnoticed, yet its absence is profoundly felt. It is not a concept, not a role, not a title, it is a presence. This presence is the inner sovereign, the psychological king, the one who rules from within. He is not loud or dramatic. In fact, most people never even realize he exists because his power is not displayed in noise, but in silence, in composure, clarity, and command. But when this inner king sleeps, when his throne is vacant, something terrible happens. Life begins to lose its center. Choices become reactive, not intentional. The individual becomes a servant to external expectations, rather than a master of internal vision. From early childhood, this figure is buried beneath layers of conditioning. Society teaches conformity before individuality. Praise is given for obedience, not for originality. And in trying to fit in, a person gradually forgets who they are. A mask develops what is called the persona, carefully crafted identity designed to please, to perform, to survive. It is not inherently false, but it becomes dangerous when it replaces the authentic self. The persona becomes the face the world loves, while the king is exiled to the unconscious. And so, decisions are made not from vision, but from fear. Relationships are built not from sovereignty, but from dependence. Achievements are pursued not from meaning, but from insecurity. The symptoms of the sleeping king are subtle but devastating. There is a chronic sense of being unfulfilled, even when success is achieved. A person might feel anxious when alone, lost when they aren't being validated, and restless when still. There's a quiet despair because deep down, they know they're not living their true life. They are performing, drifting, reacting. In this state, the world rules them, trends shape them, others' opinions mold them. And although they might appear strong on the outside, inside they are hollow. But this king, this archetype is not dead. He waits. He waits beneath the layers of fear and noise, waiting for the moment the individual becomes tired of pretending. He waits for the inner rebellion, the revolt against falseness. The king does not emerge by accident. He must be chosen, but he cannot be chosen until the person feels the weight of his absence. That emptiness, that dissatisfaction, that ache to live differently, that is not a flaw. It is the call of the king. It is the psyche's cry for center, for depth, for meaning. The presence of this king is not about dominating others. It is about self-governance. He brings inner law, structure, purpose. He does not seek followers, he seeks order. He does not speak often, but when he does, the voice is unmistakably your own, the part of you that does not need approval to feel real. To awaken him is to stop living according to scripts. It is to take responsibility for your destiny, not because it is easy, but because it is yours. And while most never meet this figure consciously, he shapes their lives all the same. When he is present, there is integrity. When he is absent, there is fragmentation. The king sleeps, yes, but his dreams become your life. The path to becoming whole is not paved with light, but with shadow. Every individual carries within them a hidden realm, dark, and unexplored continent, made up of everything they have denied, rejected, and feared in themselves. This territory is not evil, it is merely unconscious. It contains the aspects of the self that do not fit the image the persona wants to maintain. Anger, jealousy, lust, selfishness, cruelty, power hunger, sadness, and even potential brilliance that threatens others. These are all cast out into the dark. But what is buried does not die. It festers, it gathers weight, and it waits. It becomes the shadow. The shadow is not a villain. It is more like a guardian of energy that has been disowned. But because it has been ignored for so long, it no longer speaks in whispers. It speaks in eruptions. The more one represses it, the more it slips through the cracks through compulsions, addictions, outbursts, shame, projection, and emotional sabotage. The shadow does not go away just because we pretend it's not there. In fact, pretending only makes it stronger. It is the beast at the gate of transformation, the dragon guarding the treasure. To awaken the inner king, one must pass through this gate. Most people will never do this. They will keep up appearances, hide from discomfort, and project their darkness onto others. They will criticize in others what they refuse to admit in themselves. They will continue to wear the mask of goodness. While their inner world becomes increasingly fragmented, they will blame the world for their restlessness and emptiness, not realizing it is the parts of themselves they have disowned that are crying out for integration. And so they remain divided, split between the self they show the world and the self that trembles in the dark. But for those who choose to walk through the shadow gate, something extraordinary begins. The encounter is brutal. It is not poetic. It is raw. One must face the worst within themselves, the lies told, the potential wasted, the harm caused, the fear hidden behind smiles. The ego resists. It wants to run, to deny, to intellectualize. But the king cannot rise while the ego rules. To face the shadow is to humble oneself completely. It is to say, I am not who I pretend to be, and that's where I must begin. Inside the shadow is pain, yes, but also power. What we reject is often what we fear to embody. Hidden in the rage may be the fire to set boundaries. Hidden in envy may be the longing for authenticity. Hidden in sadness may be the capacity to connect deeply. The king does not destroy the shadow. He does not try to purify it. He integrates it. He makes it part of his court, gives it a role in his kingdom, because he understands that what is not integrated will eventually take control. The gate of the shadow is terrifying not because of what is there, but because it holds the truth. It strips away illusion. It burns the false self to ashes. And in those ashes, something deeper is found, not a new personality, but an original essence. Not a new goal, but a forgotten source of energy. The moment one passes through the shadow gate, they stop being a divided self. They become a sovereign. They move with a different weight, a grounded authority, a quiet intensity. Not because they are flawless, but because they have faced what most people fear to admit exists within them. At the center of every human being is a silent war unseen by the world, but felt deeply in every decision, every hesitation, every moment of self-doubt. It is a battle between two selves. On one side stands the false self, a carefully constructed image built from expectations, social conditioning, childhood wounds, and the fear of rejection. On the other side waits the real self, buried, bruised, forgotten, but unbroken. This battle defines the difference between a life of quiet despair and one of deep fulfillment. And the inner king, the true sovereign of the psyche, cannot take his throne until this war is won. The false self emerges early. As children, we learn that parts of us are acceptable and parts are not. We learn how to win approval, avoid punishment, and maintain love. In doing so, we start to disown parts of our authentic being. The loud child becomes quiet. The wild becomes tame. The angry becomes sweet. Over time, we don't just pretend, we forget. We forget who we were before the world told us who to be. What remains is a mask that smiles, pleases, performs, and obeys, even when something inside is screaming to be seen. The danger of the false self is not in its existence, it serves a function. It protects, it helps us adapt. But when it becomes our identity, the soul begins to wither. The person becomes a mirror, reflecting the desires and opinions of others. Decisions are made not based on inner truth, but on what is safe or popular. Life becomes a negotiation, not an expression. Relationships become transactions. Work becomes performance. And beneath it all, there is a haunting silence, a sense that something essential is missing. The real self does not shout, it whispers. It shows up in moments of stillness, in art, in nature, in dreams, and in deep yearning. It is who you were before the world told you who to be. It is not perfect, but it is whole. It carries wounds, yes, but it also carries fire. It has its own rhythm, its own voice, its own truth. The real self is the part of you that cannot be faked, sold, or modified to fit in. And while it may be buried, it never dies. The king within you is not interested in the false self. He does not negotiate with masks. He waits for the real self to rise. But this rising is not gentle. It requires conflict. To reclaim the real self, one must confront the false self not with hatred, but with truth. This means questioning beliefs that once felt sacred. It means disappointing those who only love the version of you that makes them comfortable. It means saying no to what once gave you validation. It means standing in your own authority, even when it shakes you. This battle is not won in a day. It happens through choices small and large. It happens every time you tell the truth instead of what is expected. Every time you honor your inner voice over the external noise. Every time you walk away from something that no longer serves you, even if it once defined you. In these moments, the real self gains ground. The throne begins to shift. The king stirs. And with every act of authenticity, the inner kingdom begins to remember its true ruler. The battle is painful, but necessary. Because only when the real self stands victorious can the psyche find peace, power, and purpose. There is a language that speaks directly to the soul, bypassing intellect, logic, and the noise of culture. It is the language of symbols. Long before written language, humans encoded meaning into images, myths, dreams, and rituals. These were not mere decorations or primitive beliefs, they were expressions of something eternal within the human psyche. Symbols are not invented, they are discovered. They arise from the deepest layers of the unconscious and point toward truths that the rational mind alone cannot grasp. In the journey toward inner kingship, symbols become guides, signposts, and mirrors. They are not answers, but invitations to remember, to reflect, to reawaken. The crown, for instance, is more than gold and jewels. It is a circle, a solar symbol, representing enlightenment, wholeness, and conscious rule. The king who wears the crown has risen above base desires. He sees clearly, not only with the eyes but with the soul. His thoughts are ordered, his will aligned, his judgment balanced. The crown rests on the head, the seat of consciousness, indicating that true rule begins within. The throne itself is not a chair of comfort, but a seat of responsibility. It is still, immovable, a symbol of inner order. To sit upon it is to no longer be tossed by emotion or pulled by impulse. It is to embody sovereignty. The sword, often misunderstood as a weapon of violence, holds deeper meaning. It is a tool of discernment, the power to separate truth from falsehood, to draw lines where boundaries must be upheld, to make decisions that carry weight. The sword cuts not only through enemies but through illusions. It is the capacity to act decisively, to assert, to defend, and also to sacrifice. No king is whole without it. For a ruler who cannot make hard choices is a ruler in name only. Even the kingdom itself, the outer world that reflects the inner state, is symbolic. A chaotic kingdom mirrors a divided self. A thriving kingdom reflects inner integration. The subjects of the kingdom are not people, but instincts, emotions, desires, thoughts, and fears. When the inner king is asleep, these forces rebel. They fight for attention, control, expression. But when the king awakens, order is restored. The kingdom is not suppressed, but harmonized. Each part knows its place. Even the dragon, long seen as the enemy, becomes a guardian of treasure. The dragon is the shadow, and the treasure is the hidden potential within it. This is the logic of symbols. They show what words cannot tell. Dreams, too, are full of symbolic content. The psyche sends images in sleep that can shake us awake. A burning house, a crying child, a lost crown. These are not meaningless. They are messages, coded expressions of our deepest truths and conflicts. Those who learn to read them gain access to the hidden dialogue of their own soul. Myths, fairy tales, religious stories, these are not old superstitions, but mirrors of the human journey. The king, the warrior, the sage, the fool, the monster, each is an aspect of us. They battle, ally, deceive, and evolve. When we recognize ourselves in them, something ancient reawakens within us. To ignore symbols is to live only on the surface. To embrace them is to walk a path that leads downward and inward, toward depth. This is not about superstition. It is about inner architecture. The psyche was not built by logic alone. It was shaped by image, by symbol, by dream. And in a time when the world demands speed and clarity, symbols slow us down and deepen us. They force us to feel, to wrestle, to interpret. The king within does not speak. In fact, she speaks in symbols. And when we learn to listen, we begin to see the world not as chaos, but as a coded mystery, waiting to be understood. The final movement in the psychological transformation is not conquest, it is integration. This is where the fragmented self begins to reunite, not by force, but by recognition. The inner king, once asleep and exiled, does not return in a blaze of domination. He returns quietly, but fully. He does not arrive to control others, but to govern the inner world. Integration means that every rejected part, every wound, every emotion and instinct is brought back into the fold, not as an enemy to be tamed, but as a citizen of the soul's kingdom. The return of the king signifies the return of order, of meaning, and of true presence. In earlier stages of growth, the human being is divided. There is the mask and what hides behind it. There is the shadow and what flees from it. There is the authentic voice, and the voice trained to mimic others. This internal fragmentation creates conflict, insecurity, and constant searching. A person moves from goal to goal, identity to identity, trying to fix something they can't name. But the thing that is missing is not something new, it is something old, something forgotten. It is the unification of all that has been divided, the harmonization of all that has been scattered. Integration is not perfection, it is wholeness. It is the moment when a person stops running from their darkness and also stops being obsessed with their light. They recognize that every part of them has a purpose, even the parts they were taught to despise. The king within knows that the angry child, the ashamed lover, the envious shadow, the noble warrior, the grieving heart, all of them belong. They are not accidents or failures, but energies that must be placed under conscious rule. And once they are seen, accepted, and given voice, they no longer sabotage from the depths. They serve. This is where the energy of transformation becomes steady. The individual no longer seeks escape in fantasy, no longer hides behind roles. They begin to walk differently. Not because they are trying to impress, but because they carry weight, a grounded calm, a noble restraint. Decisions are not impulsive, but sovereign. Words are not thrown, but delivered. Relationships become more honest, because the need for approval has been replaced by a need for truth. This is the king's energy, not loud, but unmistakable. The integrated self no longer chases freedom, because it has become freedom. It no longer begs for love, because it loves itself with fierce clarity. It no longer fears solitude, because solitude is now sacred. The external world becomes less of a battlefield and more of a mirror. And when challenges come, as they always do, the individual meets them not as a victim or a tyrant, but as a ruler, calm, clear, internally united. The king's return to the kingdom is symbolic of psychological adulthood, not in the biological sense, but in the spiritual sense. It is the end of dependence on outer validation and the beginning of inner alignment. The inner court is no longer ruled by chaos, by fear, or by fragmented voices. It is ruled by presence, by clarity, by vision. The king does not eliminate desire, fear, or ambition. He simply places them in their rightful place, ensuring they serve the self, rather than sabotage it. This is not a theory or philosophy, it is a lived state, an embodied truth. It does not require that life be easy, but that the individual be real. And once that throne is reclaimed, everything around it begins to transform, not by force, but by the magnetic weight of true authority. The journey to realizing your true potential is not found in surface-level motivation, nor in chasing temporary highs of success. It is found in the depths where the forgotten king within you waits. He is not the loudest part of your mind, but he is the most enduring. His voice does not echo with urgency, but with truth. To hear it, you must silence the noise. To embody it, you must face the parts of yourself that have been exiled, feared, and ignored. This is not a comfortable path. It demands a descent into shadow, a confrontation with the false self, and the courage to let go of the identity you never truly chose. It is a return to something older, something original. Through symbols, dreams, and deep psychological inquiry, the scattered fragments of your being begin to unify. You do not become perfect, you become whole. The king within you is not a fantasy. He is the sovereign potential of your psyche presence that brings order to chaos, that acts with intention rather than reaction, that sees through illusion and stands in truth. When he rises, you begin to live from the center, not from the margins of who you are. Your decisions carry weight. Your silence carries meaning. Your life becomes a reflection of something deeper than ambition purpose. And in that state, you do not need to rule others. You simply rule yourself. That is the highest power. That is true kingship. That is your potential, waiting to be remembered.